India's rapid growth and rising global influence have made it one of the most powerful nations in the world today. With remarkable achievements in technology, space exploration, economic expansion, and military advancements, India is truly on the rise. However, not every country is pleased to see India's progress. From historical conflicts to geopolitical rivalries, there are several nations that view India's success as a direct challenge to their own dominance or interests. In this video, we will explore the top 15 countries that harbor resentment or fear India's growing power and influence. Let's dive into the complex world of international politics and discover why these countries are not thrilled about India's remarkable ascent. 15. Russia, historically. Russia and India have long enjoyed a close partnership, especially during the Cold War, when India was seen as a reliable ally of the Soviet Union. However, with the rise of India as a global power, there are moments when Russia perceives India's increasing diplomatic and strategic relationships with Western countries as diminishing its own influence. While the two countries continue to have strong military and energy ties, Russia's growing closeness with China, which is often at odds with India, and India's pivot toward the West have created a complex geopolitical situation. Russia's historical influence in the region is now challenged by India's more diverse partnerships, especially with the United States, which complicates the former's traditional role as a regional power. 14. Indonesia. Indonesia and India have generally maintained peaceful diplomatic relations, but Indonesia's historical ties to Malaysia and its rivalry with India in South Asia occasionally manifest in subtle resentment. Indonesia is a dominant force in ASEAN, and India's increasing engagement with Southeast Asia often challenges Indonesia's influence within the group. Additionally, India's rising naval presence in the Indo-Pacific region and its collaboration with nations like Australia, Japan, and the United States are perceived as a challenge to Indonesia's strategic positioning. This delicate balance of regional power dynamics can create friction despite shared goals for economic growth and security cooperation. 13. South Korea. Although South Korea and India share a relatively cordial relationship, the growing influence of India's economy, particularly in technology and manufacturing, has led to some competitive tensions. India's rapidly expanding IT sector poses a challenge to South Korea, which traditionally dominated electronics and high-tech industries. Furthermore, South Korea's strong partnership with the United States and its interest in maintaining regional dominance in East Asia may occasionally clash with India's own strategic interests in the Indo-Pacific. While these tensions are not overt, India's success in sectors traditionally dominated by East Asian countries continues to subtly affect these relationships. 12. Israel. Occasionally, while Israel and India have strong bilateral ties, particularly in defense and technology, there are occasional moments of tension, often linked to India's stance on Palestine. India's support for the Palestinian cause in international forums has led to moments of discontent between the two nations, even as India continues to enhance its defense and trade relationships with Israel. As India's global influence grows, its independent foreign policy often leads to balancing difficult positions, which includes maintaining relationships with both Israel and Arab countries. The ongoing Palestinian issue, in particular, remains a point of contention, despite the increasingly close cooperation in other areas, like defense and intelligence sharing. 11. United States, historically. Historically, the United States has had a complicated relationship with India, particularly during the Cold War, when India's non-aligned stance and close ties with the Soviet Union caused tension. Although the relationship between the two countries has improved significantly in recent years, some segments of the US political establishment and certain global power structures still view India's rise with skepticism. India's growing technological and defense capabilities, as well as its increasingly influential role in the Indo-Pacific region, challenge American dominance. Additionally, India's reluctance to fully align with the US on certain global issues, like climate change and trade policies, often strains relations, particularly when it comes to economic or diplomatic competition in Asia. 10. Iran. Iran has a complex relationship with India, balancing cooperation with rivalry. While the two countries collaborate on projects like the Chabahar port, Iran resents India's growing closeness with the United States and Israel, especially as these partnerships often come at Iran's expense. India's compliance with U.S. sanctions on Iranian oil imports strained ties further, as Iran viewed this as a betrayal of their historical friendship. As India's influence in the Middle East grows, Iran struggles to maintain its relevance in a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape. 9. Saudi Arabia, historically but shifting dynamics. Saudi Arabia has historically viewed India's rise with a degree of skepticism, particularly during the Cold War era when India leaned toward the Soviet Union. However, relations have significantly improved in recent years due to economic and strategic partnerships. Despite this, elements within Saudi Arabia's conservative society still harbor resentment over India's treatment of its Muslim population and its growing ties with Israel. India's ability to diversify its energy imports and invest in renewable energy also poses a long-term challenge to Saudi Arabia's oil-dependent economy. 8. Afghanistan, Taliban-controlled. Under Taliban rule, Afghanistan's perception of India has shifted negatively. While India historically had strong ties with Afghanistan's previous governments and contributed significantly to its development, the Taliban regime views India's growing influence in the region with suspicion. India's support for democratic governance and its close ties with the United States further alienate the Taliban. Additionally, India's strategic partnerships with other regional players like Iran and its investments in Chabahar port challenge the Taliban's ambitions for regional integration. 7. Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's relationship with India has fluctuated over the years, with underlying resentment toward India's regional dominance. India's growing influence in Sri Lanka's political and economic spheres, particularly through projects like the Adani Group's investments, has sparked concerns about overdependence on India. Historical grievances, such as India's involvement in Sri Lanka's civil war and its support for Tamil separatists, also contribute to lingering distrust. As India's economy and geopolitical clout grow, Sri Lanka struggles to assert its own sovereignty, often feeling overshadowed by its larger neighbor. 6. Bangladesh. While Bangladesh and India share a relatively cooperative relationship, certain elements within Bangladesh view India's progress with suspicion. Issues such as water-sharing disputes over the Teesta River, trade imbalances, and India's domestic policies affecting Bangladeshi migrants, e.g., the National Register of Citizens and the Citizenship Amendment Act, have created resentment. As India's economy and international influence grow, some in Bangladesh feel overshadowed, particularly when India positions itself as the dominant power in South Asia. Additionally, India's strengthening ties with global powers often leave Bangladesh feeling sidelined on key regional issues, including the international economy and 5. Nepal. Although Nepal shares cultural and historical ties with India, its relationship with its southern neighbor has been increasingly strained in recent years. India's growing influence in the region and its assertiveness in foreign policy have led some in Nepal to perceive India as overbearing. Border disputes, such as the Kalapani Limpiadura issue, have fueled anti-India sentiment. Furthermore, Nepal's increasing closeness with China as a counterbalance to Indian influence has heightened tensions. As India progresses economically and politically, some factions in Nepal resent what they view as India's attempts to dominate the region. 4. Malaysia. Malaysia's criticism of India is largely tied to its political leadership and its Muslim-majority population. Former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad frequently criticized India over its policies in Jammu and Kashmir and its treatment of Muslims, creating diplomatic tensions. India's rising global influence, particularly in trade and technology, contrasts with Malaysia's slower growth, which fosters resentment among some leaders. India's ability to form strong ties with other ASEAN nations further isolates Malaysia, especially when trade disputes arise, such as India imposing restrictions on Malaysian palm oil imports in response to political disagreements. 3. Turkey. Turkey has increasingly criticized India, particularly under its current leadership. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has openly supported Pakistan on the Kashmir issue, which has strained Turkey-India relations. Erdogan's ideological alignment with Islamic causes often puts Turkey at odds with India's secular governance and its treatment of its Muslim population, particularly in light of domestic issues like the Citizenship Amendment Act, KAA, and the situation in Jammu and Kashmir. As India grows in international stature, Turkey perceives its own influence in the Islamic world as being diminished, especially with India forging closer ties with Middle Eastern powers like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. 2. Pakistan. Pakistan's animosity toward India stems from decades of historical, religious, and territorial conflicts, especially over Kashmir. As India continues to grow economically and militarily, Pakistan views this progress as a direct threat to its own geopolitical standing. India's global recognition for its democratic governance, technological innovations, and space achievements starkly contrasts with Pakistan's internal instability and economic struggles. The stark difference in global perception and economic power widens the gap between the two countries, intensifying Pakistan's resentment. Additionally, India's influence in international organizations and its partnerships with Western nations often isolate Pakistan diplomatically, further exacerbating its discontent. 1. China. China, as India's largest and most influential neighbor, closely monitors India's progress with a mixture of apprehension and rivalry. The two nations share a history of strained relations, primarily due to unresolved border disputes like the Line of Actual Control, LAC, and competing ambitions in Asia. India's rapid economic growth, technological advancements, and rising military capabilities challenge China's position as the dominant power in the region. Initiatives like India's Act East policy and its participation in Quadrilateral Security Dialogue are seen as attempts to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. Additionally, India's success in space exploration, such as Chandrayaan-3, and its growing IT sector, further fuel China's concerns, as they underscore India's potential to rival Chinese dominance in technology and innovation.